How's everybody doing? It's good to see you guys. Happy Memorial Day before the Memorial Day, right? Because it's tomorrow, not today. So it is tomorrow, right? Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, we are in week 5 of our series called Christology, where we are looking at who Christ was, what Christ did, why Christ did it, and how it affects our life, okay? Now, as we look at this, I got a question for you. How many of you guys would say you're movie buffs? Who loves a good movie? Anybody? Yeah? And if I were to ask you what your favorite movie is, you would say? That was awful. I didn't hear anybody. You're all like these shy people. You're all like, come on, seriously? All right. What'd you say? The Notebook? All right. That's Jim's favorite movie, too. You guys ought to get together and talk notes. I'm just kidding, man. I'm sorry. And everybody has a different genre of movie that they love. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, some people like Western, some people like comedies. I love any movie that has to do with a mobster or organized crime. I don't know why, but those things fascinate me, and I watch every one of them I can get my hands on. I love that kind of stuff. Don't you love that kind of stuff, Tim? No. Okay. Anyway, I'm telling you all this to say that, you know, we all love a good movie. However, when I look at people and talk to people sometimes in church, they'll go, man, the reason I don't read the Bible is because it's just not that exciting to me. It's like it's just, I don't know, it just kind of puts me to sleep. And I'm here to tell you that if you would take a step back and really look at the Bible, man, there are some cinematic qualities to the Bible that if you bring it to life, oh my gosh. There is some amazing cinema going on in the Bible. And you know, one of the coolest things about the Bible is there's always an awesome plot. Have you ever watched a movie that has no plot? And you're like, all the way through the movie, you paid $10, and so you're staying there and you're going, come on, at any moment in time, it's going to happen. Joe versus the volcano. Anybody watch that? The worst movie that ever was made on planet Earth, right there, right? Or if you don't understand the plot, anybody go to Lord of the Rings and not read the book? I went to 3 of those and fell asleep in 3 of those, and here's the way it always worked. I went with somebody who'd read the books, and for the first half hour, I'm going, what's going on? What's happening? And they would constantly look at you and explain it, and they go, you need to read the books. Well, it's that fat. I'm not reading that book, right? And so then I just cross my arms and I go to sleep because it's over, man. I'm not reading. I'm not watching that, right? So when we don't understand the plot, something gets kind of messed up. Now, here's what I would say about the Bible. If you took the Bob's bathrobe and sandals and the Jewish beards off of people, although we have those beards in our society now, we could make cinema out of a culturally relevant story that completely plays up with our modern day or with the modern day things going on. Think about it. Samson, dude with huge muscles and great hair. We have books that women read about him all the time. His name's Fabio, right? I mean, come on, seriously? And if you look on, man, who wouldn't want to watch a movie about a kid who's able to kill a 9.5-foot man, right? I mean, that's an awesome story. I mean, think about the cinematic quality of the Bible. Now, what we're going to read today, I want to kind of bring off the page and kind of put it in your cinematic mind and kind of help you understand what's going on so that you can get an understanding of what Jesus wants to say to you, okay? So the way we're going to do this is we're going to be in Matthew chapter 14, verse 13 today. We're going to look at Jesus feeding the 5,000, but you got to understand the plot in order to really appreciate what's going on, okay? And in order to understand the plot, you got to understand what happened right before. Right before the feeding of the 5,000 happens, a really good friend of Jesus by the name of John the Baptist, today we're just making sure we're going to call him JTB. JTB gets killed, okay? And I'm going to explain it to you here how he dies, but I want to kind of help you understand and give you some background of who JTB was before I kind of explain to you how he died, all right? So before we go to Matthew 14:13, put your finger there, and we're going to go to Matthew chapter 3, verse 1. And we're going to learn who John the Baptist was. Now, John was the precursor or the forerunner, the dude that came before Jesus to tell everybody that Jesus was coming, all right? And he was like the equivalent of trying to clean your arms and take a shower with 60 grit sandpaper. It's just never a pleasant experience when you're around John. John would say things, whatever he thought. He was blunt. He was honest. He was going to speak the truth at you, and you just walked away sometimes from John going, gosh, that dude's rough, right? Case in point, Matthew chapter 3, John is preaching to some people, and here's what it says. In those days, JTB came preaching in the wilderness of Judea, Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand, he would say. For this is he who was spoken by the prophet, saying he would come, and he would be that voice of the one crying in the wilderness. He would prepare the way for Jesus. He would make his path straight. Okay? So John's out there doing this, and it says, now John wore a garment of camel's hair and a leather belt around his waist, and his food was bugs and honey. Yum, right? And then all Jerusalem and Judea and all the region around Jordan, they were going out to him. They were being baptized by him. This crazy dude that ate bugs and honey and wore camel's hair, people were listening to this guy, and he was changing people's lives, okay? And it says, here comes the Pharisees and Sadducees, the spiritual know-it-alls of their day. You know those people that want to tell you all the verses they know about the Bible? This was the Pharisees and Sadducees. And it says, but the Pharisees and Sadducees came to him at the baptism, and he said to them, and imagine this, you come up to John, you want to check this out, and he looks and he goes, you brood of vipers. In other words, you big morons. Who invited you to come out here? Because that's what he says. You brood of vipers, who warned you of the coming wrath? What are you doing out here? And don't presume to say to yourselves that we have Abraham as our father and look all theological, because I'm here to tell you that God can take these stones and he can raise up people greater than Abraham. And then he says to him, even now, the axe that God has brought out is laying to the root of your tree, and he's going to chop you suckers down. Is basically what he's saying. And you imagine being those people? They're kind of like, whew, this dude is rough, right? Who is this guy? Who does he think he is? John was always talking like that, and he was always saying things that would just kind of make people offended. Now, imagine if John lived in 2016 in the politically correct society we live in. Can you imagine he said some of those things? They're truth, but he says them, you know. So the next thing we find, and this is what we're going to get into our storyline and put the plot for you, right before Matthew chapter 14, verse 13 is Matthew chapter 14, verse 1 through 12. Okay? And I'm just seeing if you're listening. And Matthew chapter 14, verse 1 through 12 tells a story about JTB where he is in he's kind of in a White House scandal, okay? You remember a few years back when Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky had a little scandal going on in the White House? Herod has a scandal in which he thinks that his brother Philip's wife is pretty good looking, and so he takes her from him and forces her to live, well, he doesn't force her, invites her to live in the castle, and they have an affair, and Philip is left out in the cold, and JTB comes in and he goes, Herod, you are dead wrong in what you're doing, and you need to stop. And Herod is the king, and he doesn't like that, and so he puts John in jail expecting to murder him, except for all these people that John has baptized is going to revolt against him if he kills him. And so he just puts him in jail and leaves him there. Now, to make the plot a little thicker, bring a little bit more cinema to it, one day, Herodias, who's the woman that he took away from Philip, is having a party for him, okay? And she decides that it'd be great if her daughter would come out and dance for him, okay? Last hour I was telling this woman sitting over here goes, oh, that's nasty. It's not what you think. They used to entertain each other, okay? It's not, that's the one part that's not weird in this story, right? So she's dancing, and he's so like impressed by her. It's like, oh, what a cute little girl. And he looks at her and he goes, whatever you want of my kingdom, I will give it to you. You tell me what you want. And she goes over to mom and she goes, Mom, what should I ask for? And bitter Herodias goes, you tell him you want John the Baptist's head sawed off and put on a platter, and I want it brought right here. You talk about killing a dinner party. Nobody wants the hors d'oeuvres when here comes John's bloody head on a platter, right? But imagine you're at the Christmas party. I mean, bring the cinematic quality to this. They bring the head on a platter. Isn't it time to leave at that point? It's getting too weird. I'm checking out, right? Okay, so here we are. John's head's brought up on the platter, and everybody kind of takes a collective, that's nasty, right? And then we get into Matthew chapter 14, verse 13. Okay, you with me so far? Okay. Matthew 14:13. Now when Jesus heard this, he withdrew there in a boat to a desolate place by himself. You see, Jesus was fully man, who could feel like a man could feel, and he was fully God, right? And so what would you do if somebody sawed off your buddy's head? It would make you go, man, I got to regroup. I kind of got to catch my breath. I kind of got to just kind of get away for a little bit. This is just kind of disturbing me. I want to get out of this situation. And you would just kind of back up and remove yourself. Okay? Now, remember when I told you last week or maybe the week before, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are 4 different guys telling the exact same story. It's called the Gospels. Okay? It's the first 4 books of the New Testament. They saw the same things and they report on it in their books. Okay? Mark might tell us something that John doesn't tell us, that Luke tells us, that Matthew doesn't tell us, okay? If you go into the book of Mark, chapter 6, verse 30, when Jesus steps away for a little bit, he does more than that, okay? Now, here's what it says. Let's see, 6 verse 30. I got to find it here real quick. There we go. Now, it says this in the beginning of this one. It tells us a little bit more. The apostles returned to Jesus and told him all that they had done and all that they had taught, and he said to them, "Come, let's get away by ourselves to a desolate place and rest for a while." Here's why he told them that. You got to understand this part of the plot. If you go back to chapter 6, verse 29, which I'm not going to put it up there, but I'm just going to read it to you. When his disciples heard that John had been beheaded, they came and they took his body and they laid it in a tomb. So they had been working their tails off for Jesus. They hadn't eaten, the Bible tells us in the book of Luke, in a while. They were hungry, they were tired, and they had just taken some dude's body without a head and they had laid it in a tomb. Can I ask you a question? If your weekend, this past weekend, included taking some dude's body without a head and burying it in your backyard, would that be disturbing to you? Yeah, you would be emotionally jacked up. Is that a fair statement? Right? And you would just be like, oh my word, I just want to get away. Okay? So Jesus says, hey, let's go to a desolate place. Luke tells us it's a place called Bethsaida, okay, which is in the middle of nowhere, 9 miles from the disciple Philip's house. That's important. Not Philip that got his wife stolen by Herod, but the disciple Philip. Okay? You guys tracking with me? Okay. So now let's go back to Matthew 14:13. Now when Jesus heard this, he withdrew himself from a boat to a desolate place by himself. So they head off to Bethsaida. But this is really interesting. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot to the town. From all the towns to the town. If you go into another set of the Gospels, here's what it says. When Jesus and the guys came up on the boat and hit dry ground, they look up and there is 5,000 men who have heard about the miracles that Jesus does, along with their wives and their kids. So 10,000 excess plus, right? And they're all standing there waiting for Jesus to get off the boat. You ever had a really bad weekend or a really bad day at work, and you just want to go home and put on your fuzzy slippers and your comfortable pajamas and grab a TV dinner and a book, and nobody talk to you? If I'm putting this together, this cinema quality kind of ideal together, I see 12 guys in Jesus who just want to take a collective exhale and kind of forget who they are for a while. And as soon as they get to the water's edge, they look up and they go, holy crud, there's like 10,000 people here. Now, I want you to see this because I think it's really important for you to understand who your Father is. Verse 14, when they went ashore, he saw a great crowd. This is Jesus, not the 12 disciples, because I'm thinking they're going, crud, I'm hungry, right? But Jesus, it says he had compassion on them. You ever want to talk to God and take a prayer to him that you seem as so, you kind of think, well, that's not worthy of God. That's so Mickey Mouse, so meaningless. I mean, he's not going to care about that. Jesus had just lost his best friend because he got his head chopped off. Jesus was tired. Jesus was ready to get away. Jesus had other plans, and when he saw people who needed him, he had compassion on them because that's who Jesus is. And we need to see that about our Father, okay? So, now I've set this whole kind of plot up. So they come up on the water, and now we got to go to the book of John because John gives us another understanding of it, okay? It's going to be John chapter 6, verse 1 through 15. John chapter 6. This is really cool if you go with me. And if you don't have your Bible, you can just look up there. Now, this is what it says, John chapter 6, verse 1 through 15. After this, Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias, and a large crowd was following him because they saw the signs that he was doing on the sick. So they're all wanting to be healed, right? Jesus sat down on the mountain, and there he sat with his disciples. And now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was at hand. And lifting up his eyes at them, seeing the large crowd was coming toward him, Jesus said, where are we to buy bread, Philip? Okay, now remember what I tell you about Philip? Philip lives 9 miles away, right? In a little town that's just close to Bethsaida. And he looks at Philip and he goes, hey, Philip, you live around here, dude. What are we going to get? And Philip looks up at 10,000 people and he goes, bro, we're in a desolate place. There's no Panda Express. There's no Subway. There's no McDonald's. And if I had a McDonald's, it would take 200 denarii to feed all these people, which is like 8 months of my wages. There is no way we're going to feed all these people. And then my favorite line in all of this portion of the scripture comes up. Andrew, the dumb disciple, steps up and goes, well, there's this kid over there with like 5 loaves and 2 fish. And I can just see all the other disciples going, Andrew, you're such a moron. Can't you see that? I mean, we have 10,000 people, and Andrew, Captain Obvious over here, points out we have 5 loaves and 2 fish. Oh, thank you. Right? I mean, think about it just for a second. It's preposterous. Now, theologians will want to go, man, he was seeing a spiritual thing there. No, he wasn't. He was just being dumb Andrew. Right? I mean, come on, seriously. And then Jesus stops the whole plot of the story. And he looks at Andrew when everybody else is going, you're such a moron. Dummy. Right? Give me the fish, I'm hungry. He looks at him and goes, stop, bring me that fish. And then the book of Luke tells us that he looked at them all and he goes, and I want you guys to take all these 10,000 people and I want you to sit them down in groups, because if you sit them down in groups, it'll be easier to feed them. Oh, okay, Jesus. You ever tried to sit down 10,000 people who came all there with their own agenda to be healed? They don't have any desire to probably want to sit down at that point. They just want to touch Jesus, because if they touch Jesus, they'll get fixed, right? So imagine you're 12 guys trying to sit down 10,000 people after you just watched some dude lose his head and you just buried him and you're tired and you're emotionally spent and you're kind of done. Can I kind of paint the picture about how fried these people would be at this moment in time? Oh my gosh, right? Now, think about this. Jesus says, bring me those 5 loaves and 2 fish. And he breaks it, he blesses it, he crumbles it into pieces. Well, he breaks it into pieces, and he fills 12 baskets. And he hands them to the disciples who have now managed to sit down over 10,000 people. And can you imagine being one of the 12 when he hands you a basket of 5 loaves and 2 fish broken up 12 different ways? I can just picture this in my mind. I look at the basket, I look at the crowd. I look at the basket, I look at the crowd. I look at the basket, I look at the crowd, and I go, you're flat insane, right? Now, you ready? Because this is what we just came to right here. This is what I call a crisis of belief, okay? The disciples were in the middle of the biggest crisis of belief in their life. They were emotionally spent. They were emotionally jacked up. They'd seen things that no person should have to see. They were hungry. They were tired. They wanted to go home. They had 10,000 people that were driving them nuts. I mean, can you kind of get the stress level that's going on here? And they hit a crisis of belief, and here's what it is. Follow and experience God, or ask these 3 questions and walk away. Is it safe? Is it secure? Does it make sense? Because if I'm a disciple in this moment, isn't that kind of what you're doing? Is it safe to go out in front of 10,000 people with just crumbs when they're hungry and they're in a desolate place? I mean, those people are going to tackle me, and they're going to hold me down. They're going to take my food. It's going to be like our Easter egg hunt 4 years ago. Mass carnage, right? I mean, that's what it's going to be, right? And they're going, this isn't safe, right? This is not secure. And they're looking at the food, and they're looking at the amount of people, and they're looking at the food, and they're looking at the amount of it, and they're going, this makes 0 sense. And here's where we got to get to and understand the spiritual level of this lesson right here. You ready? There will be times in your life where God only hands you 5 loaves and 2 fish broken up 12 different ways. And it's going to be your ability to accomplish a situation. And he's going to say, I want you to do it anyway. For example, some of you, you're sitting here and maybe God's going to say, hey, I want you to be the greeter at the door on Sunday mornings. And you're going to go, I don't even like to talk, right? That's your 5 loaves and 2 fish. And God's saying, do you want to experience me and follow? Or do you want to ask, is it safe, secure, and does it make sense? Some of you guys, you need to fix your marriage, and God is challenging you to fix your marriage, and you're going, dude, have you seen how broken it is? It is completely screwed up. There is no fixing this. I mean, look at the scraps that we have left, and God's going, it's enough if you'll trust me. And you're going to ask, is it safe? Is it secure? Does it make sense? Or you're going to make the choice to follow and experience God. Some of you, you're struggling in your sin life, and it doesn't make any sense of how you're ever going to get past it because you don't have the physical intestinal fortitude you feel like to get past what you struggle with. And God is saying, if you'll trust me, you have enough. And he's going to ask you, you want to follow and experience me? Or do you want to ask earthly questions like, is it secure? Is it safe? Does it make sense? Some of you, God's going to say, hey, I want you to work in children's ministry. And you're going to go, I hate children. Right? I want you to work in student ministry. I don't like kids. Right? But you got your scraps, your 5 loaves, your 2 fish crumbles. And God's going to say, but if you'll trust me, man, you have no idea what I'll do with that. You may feel unequipped, but you have no idea what I can do with your unequippedness. Let's go back to Matthew real quick and let's finish this. Matthew chapter 14, verse 13. Actually, it's verse 20. Actually, verse 19, sorry. Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass, taking the 5 loaves and 2 fish. He looked up to heaven, he blessed it, he broke it, he gave it to the disciples, and the disciples looked down at the bowls. They looked up at the people. They looked down at the bowls. They looked up at the people. I'm sure they asked the question, does this make sense? Is this going to be safe? And then they looked at God and they said, but I want to follow and experience God. You see, their choice to follow and experience God overcame every earthly fear, concern, and wonderment that they had. And here's what they experienced because they followed God. Then the disciples gave them to the crowds, and all that were there ate, and not just ate, they were satisfied. You know, we have these family dinners every time somebody has a birthday or somebody has something going on. My sister-in-law's still back there, and she just leave. Dang it, I wanted to talk about this in front of her. Anyway, and she has this daughter named Ellie Jo. Cutest little girl in the world. I love Ellie Jo. But Ellie loves deviled eggs. And I never get enough deviled eggs at our parties because, as soon as she sees them, it's just like, she's slamming deviled eggs. She'll eat like 14 of them. This kid is like a Hoover for deviled eggs. It's crazy. And I always walk away from our get-togethers wanting more deviled eggs, right? I want to read this to you. 10,000 plus people, 12 baskets of less than even close to what would feed maybe 9 people, right? Look what it says. When they were done, they all ate, but they didn't just eat. They had enough deviled eggs that everybody walked away and went, man, I had enough. That was good. I enjoyed that. Think about that. And not only that, but it says that 12 baskets of fish and bread were picked up after that. Now, come on, let's take you and let's put you in this movie. Let's take the bathrobe and the sandals off, and let's put you in current day understanding of God, where God asks you to do something that is so much bigger than you think is even possible. And you're asking the questions, is this safe? Is this secure? Does this make sense? And then you're faced with the question, am I willing to follow and just experience God? And let's say that you say yes, like the disciples did. Imagine being a disciple, walking with your basket, and you're walking through the crowds and you're going, here you go, here you go, here you go. And every single time somebody picks something up, it's like nothing goes away. See, I don't think God never works this way. God didn't just go, I bless this, fish and bread everywhere, right? I don't think that's the way it works. God never gives me more than I need because then I don't trust him, right? What God does is he gives you this less than enough, and he says, close your eyes, trust me, hold my hand and walk. And when I take that, then it's like it just never goes away. And can you imagine being a disciple, getting to the very last guy and going, here you go, buddy. And you look down and you're like, how is that possible? I just fed 2,000 people. Can you imagine how it would drop your jaw on who God is and the validity of him and the power of him and the majesty of him? I think a lot of people sit in churches all over America, warm in a chair, and they've never known the power, validity, and majesty of God. Because when God says, hey, take your 5 loaves and 2 fish crumbles and go do what I ask you to do, we go, that doesn't make sense. I don't feel secure in that. Man, I don't feel safe. I'm not doing that. And we cross our arms and we go, you know, God, I know that's what you want. And that's for Jimmy over there. He's the super spiritual one. Go ask him, right? But me, I warm a chair. Who am I, right? What a joke. Because we miss what God has for us. So can we make it personal for just a second? What do you need to put away? What do you need to fix in your marriage? Where do you need to get involved in this church? Do you have a neighbor that needs a knock on their door that invites them to North Road? And you've been saying, no way, God, I'm not knocking on my door and being one of those Jesus freaks that invites them to church. I'm not weird like that. That's not safe or secure. That doesn't make sense, right? What is it that God is calling specifically out of you? Maybe he's asking you to be a foster parent. You're like, no way, man. I got teenagers. I ain't starting that process over. That's crazy. Crazy talk. That's not safe. But maybe that's what God's asking of you. Maybe God's asking you to move and start a ministry. Maybe God, who knows what God's at? Maybe he's asking you to change jobs and you've been going, no, I'm safe and secure here. But maybe God doesn't want you safe and secure there. Maybe God wants you to move and he's been telling you for a while and you've just been ignoring him and you're missing the experience of following him with your whole heart. You know what happens when you follow with your whole heart? Let me tell you just one really cool story. We have a guy that sat in actually both guys sat in the second service of the service today. One's name is Lee Lassiter. I don't know if you know Lee. Lee's just everyday average farm boy. I mean, that's kind of what he is. If you talk to Lee, it's like, oh, shucks, how you doing kind of guy. And then we had another guy who is a carpenter. His name's David Chidster. And Dave and Megan are married, and about a year and a half ago, they were having some marriage issues, and we were giving away turkeys on Thanksgiving, and we told everybody, hey, take a turkey and go find somebody that needs a church to go to and say, hey, I thought of you, and I want you to have this. And Lee knocked on David and his wife's door and said, hey, here's a turkey. I've just been thinking about you guys. I want you to come to my church. You're really important to me. 3.5 months ago, Sean Ohms baptized David and his wife because they came to know Jesus. Right? Now, you think anybody needs to tell Lee Lassiter that God's at work? No, he just experienced it firsthand. And he gets to sit back there and go, yeah, I got to experience that. I wasn't too scared. I didn't need security. I wasn't having to be safe. And look what God did, right? The other end of the spectrum, let me give you the other end of the spectrum. When I was a kid, 1984, Rattle and Hum came out by U2. Anybody remember that CD? Come on, Rattle and Hum, the CD. You guys don't remember that? Wow, I'm old. Okay. Anyway, U2 came out with a CD called Rattle and Hum, and on that CD was a song called I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For, and it's a song that Bono writes about his life. And this is a long time Bono ago. This isn't Bono now. I'm not saying that, but this is what he wrote a long time ago. He was writing about Jesus at the end of the song, and he wrote, he broke the bounds, he loosed my chains, he carried the cross and all my shame, he broke my shame, and you know I believe it. And then he finishes that up with a tagline that says, but I still haven't found what I'm looking for. In other words, I know all these things, but I still have a void. Do you know why at that point Bono probably had a void? Because he had all the head knowledge that he needed. But like I said last week, it hadn't traveled 12 inches to his heart. And he could get his mind around that God does big things, but he couldn't get his mind around that God could use him. Some of you are just like that. God does big stuff. He does it through Jim and Bill and all these, but he ain't going to do it through me. Bull crud. That's the lie from the pits of hell, right? Because if you'll take your 5 loaves and 2 fish crumbles and you'll look at God and go, I know what you want, and the answer is yes, he will blow you away. He'll drop your jaw, and you'll know God more intimately than you ever thought was possible. I've said this 100 times, I'll say it again. Sitting in here today, right here, all of you in this room and the 2 services before, is a result of me looking at the crowds and looking at the bull and looking at the crowds and looking at the bull and going, you mean if you want me to move to Missouri? You want me to leave a 6-figure job? You want me to go live where I grew up? I don't want to go back there. That's honestly what I thought, no offense. But I thought, I don't even know how we're going to afford a house. And on faith, we came and bought a house, and we started this church, and the rest is history. And can I just tell you something? I love where I live, and I would never be anywhere else than right here because, you ready? Because in my life, this is my 5 loaves and 2 fish experience, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. Will you do me a favor? Will you bow your head and close your eyes for just a second? Just bow your head and close your eyes. I don't want you to raise your hand today. I don't want you to make some public decision today. Here's all I want to ask of you today. You ready? What is God asking of you What is the 5 loaves and 2 fish broken pieces experience that he's asking of you? Some of you guys might go, well, you know, I thought I had one of those here at this church. I thought God was asking me to serve, but that hasn't worked out. You know what? You need to go after it relentlessly until you find it. Those disciples that day, can you imagine? They could have gotten about 50 guys into those 10,000 that they had to feed and go, this isn't working. I'm done. I'm out. I'm turning around. You cannot turn around. If you want to experience and follow God, you have to give him everything, and you have to be relentless in going after him. And if you do, he's going to blow your mind. So let me ask you again. Does your marriage need to be fixed? Do you have a sin that you think you're incapable of getting rid of? Is God asking you to step up and lead a ministry or work with kids? Or what's he asking of you? Are you willing to say yes? Are you willing to allow him to blow your mind? Or are you just going to keep going, that's not safe. That's not secure. That doesn't make sense. God will never do in your life what makes sense. Because he doesn't work on your schedule, he works on his. He doesn't work in your mind frame, he works in his mind frame. Jesus, I pray for those that are sitting in here today that are having a crisis of belief. And I pray, God, that you would give them the strength and the ability to just walk, to just take one step after another toward you. Being obedient, to say, God, this doesn't make any sense. I feel completely unqualified, but I'm going to trust. God, give them the strength to trust and to fulfill that jaw-dropping experience of really knowing you. In your name I pray. Amen. Let's stand. Let's sing.